Hi, my name is Courtney Zimmerman. I'm with Aurora Research Associates, and I've been working with the Vandalia Heritage Foundation this year to prepare the National Register nomination for the Buxton and Landstreet Company store in Thomas. We wanted to share some information with you about the project and this amazing piece of West Virginia history. So let's start out with a little bit of background about the National Register of Historic Places. To be listed in the National Register, a property must be at least 50 years old, meet at least one of the National Register criteria, and retain integrity, which means that it retains pretty much the same historic materials and appearance that it did historically. So there are 4 National Register criteria, starting with A. That covers properties that are associated with an historic event, which could be anything from early settlement to education, labor protests, etc. Criterion B applies to properties directly associated with a historically important person. Criterion C covers architectural significance, which is anything from the West Virginia State Capitol to a log cabin. And Criterion D typically applies to archaeological sites. So the nomination form is reviewed at the state level by the West Virginia State Historic Preservation Office. It has to be approved by the Archives and History Commission, and then finally it is reviewed by the National Park Service before it's listed. So our project is located outside of Thomas, the Central Business District of Thomas, in what was formerly Buxton. The historic boundary here is shown in red on the right. That is the tax parcel of the current property. To go over the period of significance, it starts in 1900, which is when the building was constructed, and it extends through 1950, which is the year that it ceased operation as a company store. The areas of significance for this nomination are Criterion A for commerce, specifically the coal industry, and Criterion C as an example of the Italian Renaissance Revival architectural style. So to provide a little bit of context for you about the building, let's start with Henry Gassaway Davis, who is shown here. Davis was a very influential businessman in West Virginia in the late 1800s through the early 20th century, and eventually became a U.S. Senator. But he got his start working for the B&O Railroad, worked his way up, and eventually started his own businesses in railroads and coal. Lots of his family members worked with him. There are towns all over West Virginia named for them: Thomas, Gassaway, Elkins, very influential people in our history. Davis started the West Virginia Central and Pittsburgh Railroad, and that's not a typo, by the way. They left off the H in Pittsburgh. In 1884, it was completed from Cumberland to Elkins, and as you can see from this photo, it was not an easy task to build this railroad through the forests and terrain of Tucker County. The railroad provided access to coal and lumber resources in the area, and so in 1886, Davis established the Davis Coal and Coke Company. Their products were shipped all over the nation and even the world, and they were used in steel making in particular, but in a lot of industries. So the company was headquartered in Buxton, which is right next to Thomas. Buxton was a company town and had everything the company needed to be self-sufficient. It had housing for the miners, the mine portal, the coke ovens, railroads, schools, churches. Everything was located right there within close proximity, all owned and controlled by the coal company. Company towns were very common all throughout West Virginia. There was literally nothing in many of these places in the state where the coal was located. So the company had to provide all the infrastructure for all these thousands of workers, the mine operation itself. Here we have various examples of company stores in West Virginia. And these are really the center of life in a company town, where you would get paid. buy all your goods. In fact, a lot of coal companies paid their workers in scrip, which was only good at the company store. So that was a bit of a monopoly that they had regarding their workers. The Buxton and Landstreet company store was a chain, and it had locations at Davis mines all throughout the area. So here on the bottom right, you can see the Kempton, Buxton and Landstreet store. The Thomas store, which is the one that we're nominating, was the flagship for all of the Buxton and Landstreet company stores. So because this store was the flagship, they built a pretty grand building for it. The original wood store burned down in 1899. So they built this brick structure in the Italian Renaissance Revival style. This style was popular in the 1880s. Here are some of the most prominent examples of this style from the big cities. So they would build these very grand buildings, and then the style would trickle down gradually to more rural areas in sort of more modest ways. So they really wanted to make a statement by building in this style that this store was reliable, high quality, modern, secure, and that it was an experience for customers to come and shop there. This is the image they were trying to project, building a store in this style. And you can see some of the common characteristics between these are the monumental proportions of these buildings, the repeating arches, all classical elements, very symmetrical, repetitive facade, a real sense of order and symmetry. So here we have it as it is today, and you can see that it's retained all of its historic features on the exterior, original windows. They use this yellow brick on the facade, which makes it stand out from your typical red brick commercial buildings. And then another important characteristics are these large display windows, which would have been one of their main ways of advertising their goods. There was no TV, there weren't big catalogs that went around. People would see the goods through these windows. This is showing the side and rear elevations, which are not as ornate as the front, which is to be expected. They would have focused most of their money on making the front very impressive, but it's still very organized, symmetrical facades and still using the arch motif. So here are some of the unique details and materials that they used. The monumental arch is fine carved stone. Again, a way of saying you're here to stay. Your name is written in stone on the front of the building and you're well established. And then inside they used this white glazed brick, which is something you don't see every day. All of the ceilings are this stamped metal, very decorative, and then these classically influenced metal columns. So here's another historic shot that's just kind of showing how this building really stands as it did 120 years ago, and it's a link that we have to that experience of the company store, which is you know, part of times gone by, but you can still go and feel what it was like to be in a building like this. Here's one of the few images we have of the interior, showing what you would have seen after you passed through that monumental entrance. And our local friends in Thomas remember just the huge variety of things that they had for sale, and they did have all the quality name brands that you would want, and it was an experience to shop here. So that was our brief overview of the property and some of its history. Our draft nomination is currently in review. We expect to get comments, and we'll do revisions and hope to present this at the winter meeting of the Archives and History Commission, and then the National Park Service will review it. It takes a few months, but we hope to have it listed formally by spring of 2022. Until then, you are welcome to access the draft nomination at the link shown, and we are happy to have your comments, any information you have about the building, memories, or anything that you would like to let us know, please feel free to contact us. Thank you so much for your time.